Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Debra Eckerling, creator of the DEB Method for Goal Setting Simplified and author of your Goal Guide and 52 Secrets for Goal Setting and Goal Getting. You can't reach your goals on your own. You need your people. So every week I bring together some of my people to dive into the topic. And today we are talking about creativity and tech. So whether you're watching us, I guess, live tech or the replay or listening to us as GoalChat on the Marketing Podcast Network, we are glad you're here because let me tell you, we have, per usual, a superstar panel. We have today Rob Kutner, author, screenwriter, and doer of all sorts of the things. Deborah Pardes from Swell Audio and Yael Swerdlow from Maestro Games. And one thing about, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute, they're all just passionate about creativity, but also getting those vibes out into the world, which I think is that not why we're all here, not just to share what it is that we love, but to share what we love with the world. So welcome, friends.
Hi.
Rob.
Hi.
Rob, let's start with you. Please share who you are and why you are here, and we'll go from there.
I was first a TV writer for late night shows like The Daily Show and Conan, and since then I have moved into writing books in animation and putting on shows. And I'm here because you asked the most interesting questions about how I do it and what keeps me going.
And we were discussing in the pregame, as it were, Rob and I met years ago, like 10 or 12, at Sublime Prime Time, which is WGA West panel before the Emmys. And we connected on social media and we went like a decade without having any communication. And then you've been on the show a bunch of times and you keep giving me great things to write about. So I remember I reached out to you and you said you've got cool projects, and that is why you were here. So welcome. It's always great to see you.
Always good to be here.
Debra, welcome back to GoalChat.
So happy to be here. Just fixing my neck a little bit.
Okay. And we met, I've known you probably the least amount of time, but we met because someone introduced me to Swell a couple years ago, which is the coolest thing, but you can describe it better. So why don't you do that?
Sure. Swell is just a way for you to podcast without any tech, just using your phone. Go straight to Spotify and Apple and YouTube. And it connects to my passion. I've been in audio and storytelling my whole life. And this, for the last 5 years, has been my focus. So really happy to be here. And it's totally in the line of creativity and technology holding it. So.
And what was it about Swell that first got you?
Completely the invitation to demystify podcasting, to make it something that was accessible to people, to bring people to a level of excellence in audio and in talking. And that's really where I think we sit most naturally, from the campfires of thousands of years ago to now. I think all other forms of communication have barriers to them. I think voice does not.
Well, we do all love the talking because, how else do you spread your message, your expertise, and the things that you're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yael, great to see you. Welcome to GoalChat.
Thank you. Pleasure to see you all too.
Who are you and what the heck is Maestro Games?
Who am I? I'm trying to figure that out right now. Actually, I am the CEO and founder of Maestro Games, SPC, which stands for Social Purpose Corporation. And what we are is neuroaesthetic technology. We are at the intersection of behavioral health, neuroscience, and the arts. So we use music, virtual reality. We gamify it. We bring players moments of beauty and joy and awe as a way of countering PTSD and moral injury and burnout and stress. So, but in terms of who I am, I guess the best way to define myself is the ancient Jewish teaching of tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. That is my guiding light. That is why I believe I'm here on this planet. I was a photojournalist for now I'd say the first third of my adult life. and then was in diplomacy for a while, and then really looked around and saw that humanity's in pain and we're ignoring the most powerful healing technology, which are the arts, and especially music. So there's a really interesting backstory with, my late father. The company is his legacy. And that's really what the mission is. The macro version is Tikkun Olam. My dad suffered greatly, but music was his saving grace. And so the micro version of the purpose of the company is to turn my dad's darkness into light. So those are the two things. And creativity is the saving grace for all of us. We just don't do it enough.
Mm.
What a beautiful testament.
I feel like saying amen. Can I say amen?
You
Amen.
can.
Amen.
Yeah, it is indeed. It is indeed. And it's we've got to get back to what moves us without barriers, and we can use technology for that.
Which is a great lead in to my first question, which is people normally, well, we do, but I'd say people normally do not associate creativity with tech. So why should they? Yael, do you want to start?
It's creativity. It taps into all the other things that are really definitely lacking in our world right now, like empathy and passion and connection and all of the things that we are suffering from, this incredible amount of loneliness that everyone's yelling and screaming about, that the loneliness is worse than smoking cigarettes and all the other stuff. If we tap into our creativity, if we use technology to be able to tap into our creativity, whether it's playing the last Maestro, which is the name of my game, that's the only commercial I'll do, I promise, or if it's just using technology on your iPad to sketch or whatever it may be, you're able to find yourself in a place where you're having self-compassion, and you're able to find a place where you're able to express yourself, and being able to express yourself creatively and using technology for that is really a natural lead-in to being able to express yourself verbally. Going to Deborah's point about what her company does, you need to be able to speak your truth, and creativity is speaking your truth. If you need technology to enable you to do that, then that becomes a great tool.
Ooh, I love the way you put that. So Deb, what do you think?
I just want a do-si-do with that. I think that most of what Yael said encapsulates this. I think what I want to add is the greatest technology in the world is invisible to the person who's in the creative process. I was a musician for the first third of my life, and I learned how to record my albums, and I had technology to do that. Mm-hmm. And there was a point where the digital audio workspace for me became my partner, but it wasn't a good partnership. I didn't find myself in flow because it was technology, and I approached it every morning as I'd sit down in my chair, and here I am with this piece of thing that might break. So my passion is to look at the creative process from a very personal point of view. I know when flow stopped, and I could not believe I was in a flow and I had to stop because something stopped working. So I'm a stickler for features and benefits and all the things that you do on the user interface aspect, but because ultimately you want anybody to be able to use your tech and then fly with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So tech is a vehicle for being more creative.
Yeah,
is what you're saying. When it works.
When it works.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Yeah,
that's all.
What do you think, Rob?
Okay, well, I'm gonna push back a little bit and then answer the question in a way that everyone will like. But I just want to say, as a sort of boundary case, when I start I think I've talked about this in your podcast before, maybe, when I start my creative process or something, I actually have to walk away from technology a little bit. Like, I go out in my backyard with a notebook and a piece of paper and a pen, just to really clear my head, because there's so many distractions, and also technology reminds you of all the things you have to do that aren't the things that your editor is asking you to do, or nobody's asking you to, but you want to do for the world. So there's limits, there's time and place. And then when I'm ready to work, I want to say that technology has made it possible for me to expand my my circle of creative collaborators around the entire planet. So in the past 3 years, in part because of the pandemic, but also just in terms of the changing nature of the industries that I'm in, I've been looking abroad for partners, and so I've ended up writing an animated show with people in Israel and animating in Indonesia, writing a movie with someone in France, and another one with someone in India and Brazil. And these are just normal things. So they're just sort of part of my day, and it's kind of the way I work. And even with people across the country, like I think it just, if you can, for me, collaboration is really is a big part of creativity. And it used to be you just only collaborated in person with people, or it was a little bit awkward. I remember when I was in college, I don't want to date myself, but let's just say the internet was not as robust as it was. It was around, but I had a writing partner, and we were writing for TV, and he was in LA and I was in New York, and it was almost a deal breaker because it was hard to line up time zones. It was phone calls. For some reason, that's a little bit, you got to put I'm dating myself again. You got to put the phone receiver on your shoulder while you type. Like, it was a whole different ballgame. And nowadays, it's as easy as clicking on anything to just call up your partner, or even on like WhatsApp. I can just write someone. I just wrote someone in Germany because I had a question about a project. The only thing I have to remember is time zones, but there's technology for that too.
I love it. And we use that. So this show was born out of the pandemic because in 2020, we were looking for ways to have conversations without being in the same room. And at least for me, and I'm guessing for several, if not all of you, I was using Zoom and Tech and Skype and communicating that way, but it was not a mainstream thing. And then I think about my book that's coming out, 52 Secrets for Goal Setting and Goal Getting. I interviewed 60 people, most of them via Zoom, from all over the world. So there really is that wonderful connectability aspect to technology that we take for granted now, but it wasn't a thing really so much, or mainstream. Gosh, 5 years ago? Is it really 5 years?
Deb, our experience with what Rob is saying really hit home during the pandemic because people were talking to each other. It's an interactive platform. So when I was most isolated, I was most connected. And people know that the platforms like this do bring people together because of that. And then the big challenge is, how do you take that connectivity and help it nurture you and not keep you addicted? And I think that's really the part that's fascinating to me. Like, when do you get off and go out into the world? And when do you stay and, make that connection stronger? And I'm fascinated. I would love to put this out there in terms of like, when you have that collaboration, Rob, how often do you jump on a plane and be with people if possible? And what's the difference there from the creative flow process? Because I think we're wired for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like you figured out the secret buried in that thing I just said about the fantasy of technology solving all things. So in fact, this person I mentioned that I'm writing something with in France, he's my writing partner, and we had a screenplay, and we got up to a certain point with it. We outlined it. We sort of wrote scenes ourselves. But then I actually did this summer, in fact, I had a trip out there for other reasons to Europe. And so we arranged it so that we had like a 3-week chunk. So in fact, exactly what you're talking about is that we could really you can't really do everything as well, I think. I mean, people do, but I think we had a much better flow when we were like together, like in the same place, in the same space, kind of always thinking about it.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to not.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, the flow. I'm just flowing with this, Deb. I feel like,
which is what we're supposed to do. We
but
can have
I
a conversation and let other people watch. That is the whole point. So please.
I don't want, but I do think this concept of PTSD is so fresh in all of our minds because of the war going on. I have family in Israel, and I know that there's a point where people need the hug. And what is that about, Yael, with PTSD? How physical can people need versus the serving it up through electronics and technology?
Well, so we're deploying to Israel. So full disclosure, I will be deploying the last Maestro to Israel and hopefully Ukraine as well. There's a difference, I think, between PTSD and moral injury, first of all. And we treat moral injury as a separate diagnosis. And so PTSD is an event that happened to you. Moral injury is how that event went against your moral code, if you will, right? And so there's definitely different types of injuries. So with healthcare providers, for example, and military and law enforcement and folks, the things that really drive the suicides is a lot of it is attributed to undiagnosed moral injury. It's very fresh right now because one of the survivors of the Nova Festival actually committed suicide yesterday on her 22nd birthday, and because she just was so consumed by what they're saying is PTSD and the amount of friends that she lost, and she just, and they're saying, that the state failed her in terms of being able to offer her treatment. What is hard about the PTSD is that it's a very slippery slope, and what the arts do, and especially like in the case of moral injury, creativity and play are the hallmarks of healing, and being able to feel beauty and joy again, and awe, and believe that you're worthy of that. And there's the whole thing in Israel, obviously, of survivor's guilt and all of that. It's so complex and so difficult that there has to be gentle healing as opposed to putting somebody in an environment where they're saying, okay, here are either healing technologies, use them and you'll be better. That's not what we're claiming. I mean, we're very focused at Maestro Games backing up what we claim. I had gone to a tech healthcare convention, or a trade show rather, and there was somebody there with an app, and they were saying that their app stops suicide, and I'm like, you cannot claim that. You cannot say that. Wow. Because if you say that, they're like, no, we have proof. I'm like, bullshit. No, you don't, because there's no way. And we're really careful. And we did our first case study with the nurses at Children's Hospital in Orange County, just about secondary PTSD and burnout. And it was strong. The data was strong enough for a peer review in the Journal of Nursing Administration research issue. But I'm not going to stand there and say, oh, well, survivors of the Nova Festival here, I know you're suffering horrifically with everything you saw and experienced. I can cure you. There's no way I would say that, because it simply isn't true. I can be a tool that you use to release your emotions and to get into a state of bliss and to help diffuse what you're feeling. But it has to be combined with all of the other things that are necessary for somebody who suffered such horrific trauma. And that's the thing that is what we're finding right now. Like, people are claiming that MDNR works, or people are claiming that psychedelics work, or people are claiming that this works and that works. Everybody's an individual. Or reimmersion. God forbid I would ever want to reimmerse somebody into the trauma that they did in virtual reality. That would be like horrific. But if there has to be like individual, if you will, cocktails that are put together for each person, because each person's different. You don't know what their levels of resilience are. And creativity literally is the path through this, though. That I was in Berlin a couple of weeks ago for the International Association for Music and Medicine Congress, and it was amazing. And a lot of the research that was presented dealt with provider burnout from the pandemic and PTSD and all of the things that were going on with folks, and the use of music for releasing these emotions and getting to a place of peace. But it's a process, and it's not the be all end all. It's a tool. It's a method. The survivors of the Nova Festival, their motto is, "We will dance again." If that isn't a testimony to the power of art, the power of dance, and the power of music, I don't know what is. They're literally saying, "We will dance again," and it's a sacred vow that they've made to themselves and to the community. But each person's ability to be able to dance again, that's unique to them.
I personally am a huge fan of dancing in terms of it shifts what you are doing and taking it out of the really serious element, but it doesn't matter how bad a day that you were having. You turn on the music and you dance for a few minutes and it makes everything better, because you cannot dance and be joyless at the same time. It just math, right? You cannot do that. And for me, dancing and cooking, I think those are my go-to creative expressions, and having nothing to do with tech, unless of course you count my Instant Pot and my air fryer. So what are ways in which you all like to experience creativity in a techless sort of way? Rob, I feel like you're good to answer this one first.
Techless. Okay.
Like just completely techless? Like what do you tell me exactly?
Yeah, techless. Well, you were talking about it before.
Like Amish? Like are we talking Amish or
dealer's choice? Jewish, Amish, vegan. I would never do that. I like my chicken soup too much. Now, what are ways in which you like to express your creativity without tech?
Oh, okay. I mean, you mean just like sort of in any kind of way, like whether it's for an audience or not? Like, I mean, that because that's kind of important, because I think we think of tech as sort of being an audience connector or amplifier, and there's just personal, So for example, I started playing the bass. I'm taking up the bass as a new instrument, bass guitar, because I wanted to learn a musical instrument. And so a very real example is that I choose not to use the amplifier when I am practicing, so as not to disturb my family and my neighbors and my sense of self. So to me, that's a very like private, it's like a super private, like creative thing I do. And then every now and then I play with like other musicians and stuff like that. So that's like the most, it's not an acoustic guitar exactly, but for me, it feels like a very like at night, I just sit with the thing and work on a song or something like that just for myself. I think, again, you're talking about like sort of smaller scale, I think, by definition, but, I obviously like to, one thing is that, this is completely tech free, is that you may notice is I put on the Purim spiel at my, I think I've been putting them on for 20 years, Purim spiels, and it's kind of a secondary question whether they get filmed or not, because it's not that important, but it's basically live theater that will evaporate, that will just be there for the moment. It changes every year, and there's kind of no concern about who sees it. I mean, we do like to record it just for posterity, but it's really a completely like live interpersonal thing, and it's very creative.
I like that. So it's just sort of putting ideas out there, whether or not there's tech involved to record it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it just sort of may depend on just like the size or the immediacy, if it's really interpersonal with other people. I think, for me, like writing is a pretty low tech tool, honestly. Like it's really just, I'm still using Microsoft Word like I was 30 years ago. Like it's really not that technical. The only difference might be that you have the option to like, look things up on the internet, that sort of thing, for good or for ill, like right away. My preference is actually rather to get someone to sort of like help me with that, so I can sort of focus on the writing or something like that. So I prefer not to do that. And also, sort of the stuff I was mentioning earlier, the ADHD in me means that when I start looking something up on the internet, I'm probably going to look up something else up, and then I might check something else, and then I might check this, and then I'm going to I've just lost 15 minutes or longer. So, I mean, I feel like it's a double-edged sword for me, and I sometimes I like to be able to control it, and sometimes I'm concerned that it controls me.
It makes complete sense. I am always the fan of, first draft for anything long form and sometimes short form, but any books, any big ideas always starts with a paper and pen, because then you've got the flow without that barrier of tech throwing you off kilter.
Yeah. I feel like it helps with writer's block too. Like, is there something for me about like that, again, that Microsoft Word, just that screen, we have to type, there's a certain formality, there's a certain like professionalness to it where I feel like, now I've got to deliver, versus like me and my CVS $1.99 notebook and my, stolen pen from a conference in my crappy falling apart chair outside. That's just so like down to earth that nobody's expecting anything. And that frees me up. I think that sort of opens up the box.
Love that. What about you, Deb?
Do you think it's still $1.99 on CVS, or is it
Yeah.
gone?
I don't know. Maybe it's $3.99. It's still a good deal
Those
comparatively.
composition books. I always take out. I scratch out the CO and it's COM, and it's just position books. I always take away those
Ooh.
position book.
I like that.
For me, it's my fire pit, my backyard. It's marshmallows. It's inviting friends. It's cooking. It's my garden. I feel the creative process for me is usually surprising. So I think things happen when I'm in other spaces. Because I have a multimedia sort of expression these days. I have different things I do, and I need to mix it up. So I think nature's a good friend, and food. But it's lovely. It's really lovely to just light the fire. There's something about the fire that nothing exists except the fire.
Nature and food are your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
And Yael, what about you? What are the unplugged things that you like to do?
Unplugged is I make the best Ukrainian borscht you'll ever have. I've totally got into soup, so I make Ukrainian borscht. Obviously, chicken soup. I'll go head to head with you on that one, Deb. French onion soup, mushroom, lentils, all that stuff. So I make soups, which I love doing, and then, but I do put music on when I do that. And then the other one is, which I'm not doing enough, is a roll of black and white film through my fully manual Leica M6.
Ooh.
So, and just wander around and shoot pictures.
Wow.
But just getting back to it, because before, I'm self-taught. So it was a passion when I was a teenager that I developed into a career, and then stepped away from it, but it's not a career anymore. So now I have to recapture the passion and the love for it when I'm not getting paid for it anymore. So that's a thing that I'm still on that journey of rediscovering. So that's literally a roll of black and white film through a fully manual camera with no bells, no autofocus, no digital, no nothing.
Fun. I took a photography class in college, and it was black and white film that you learn to develop.
Yep.
And it amazes me the things that just showed up that came to California with me. But I do have those photos. I think I stumbled upon them not too long ago. So
that's awesome.
It's really interesting, when you are at one without technology, what you can discover. Now let me ask the opposite question, which is, what is the best way to make technology your creative friend?
Oh my God, there's so many different answers to that. If I wanted to do photographically, you can just go completely crazy with Photoshop and all the other different things that you might want to do to play around with. And I'm not sure where that noise is coming from. I don't know if it's me or not. I'm sorry.
I think it is. That's why I've been muting you when you're not talking.
That is so odd.
Sounds like someone's using a pressure cooker.
I was going to say, it does sound like soup.
I promise that's later. I'm not.
Speaking of technology not being your friend.
I know, right? So there's all the different ways that you can play around with different apps and stuff like that to manipulate your photos into really amazing creative things. I have a good friend who later in life started shooting pictures, very documentary style photojournalism, like of dancers in Cuba and stuff. And then she totally got into the creative aspect of just incredible filters and just different ways of manipulating the image. So there's that, and then obviously being able to play around with music and all the other things you can do. And also, frankly, in food, you can use technology to mess around with your food too. So
now, are you talking to hack in terms of finding new recipes, or like these really techno gadgets, or both?
Both actually. I mean, finding new recipes is a lot of fun, but techno gadgets are, and also, frankly, being able to grow things sustainably because of agri-tech right now. That is a really, really big deal. I mean, we have so many, not necessarily, I still hold the line against like the Frankenfood type stuff, but there's all these different ways to be able to create incredible, just incredible recipes using technology and all the, that's been done in agri-tech. So, do global greenhouses that people are able to have food that they normally wouldn't have, does that qualify?
Sure, why not? Everything counts.
Okay.
We're talking about creativity. You can be as creative with your answers as you would like.
Okay.
That is a win.
Yeah. And just going back to Rob's point, though, I'm definitely passionate about the paper and pen, and being able to write down what your plans are. And you're absolutely right about the intimidation factor of the cursor blinking at you. So, yeah, definitely with you on that one. And I want a fire pit, but I think I'd get kicked out of my apartment if I did that right now.
And something that's also really interesting about this conversation is all four of us are in LA. So that almost never happens. Usually we have some outliers. So Pardes at Deb's house, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so Deb, how do you make to hack your friend?
Well, I was thinking about what Rob was saying. I mean, there's nothing better than what tech gives us in terms of reach. If you're there, everybody out there has some degree of, anonymity before they make themselves known, and you need the invitation. And I think that that's in itself worth a whole, what is an invitation, and how do you bring people into your life in a inviting, productive way? Because you don't want to, it's like going on Fiverr or something. You're looking for a designer, and you're just got a bunch of people that just are not your friend. But then once in a while, the person that you've been looking for your whole life shows up, and they're the best designer in the world. But I think when you use tech to reach across the pond, or reach down the road, or reach across the country, you're leveraging the most amazing thing that was not with us ever before tech. And that's just phenomenal. I mean, Rob, I can't imagine you working now without that incredible lever that you can pull and say, I want to talk to someone who has experience in Iceland, when it's summertime. What do they feel like? What do they wear? Boom, you're there in a second by just putting it on some kind of Reddit channel. And that to me it's just ridiculous. I have no moments in my life where I feel like I can't find something out.
That's true, because the whole 6 degrees of separation, it's 1 degree, if that, because you always start with your friend Google, and then if that can't help, you see who in your network knows the information you need. So completely with you on that. And so, Rob, I know you talked about this before, about how you use it as a way to hack for collaboration. Is that the best way to hack your creative friend, or do you have other ideas?
I think Deborah's bringing up, Deborah too is bringing up a great point too about just the information resources. And so it's one about reach in terms of like collaborators, and 2 about audience, and also 3 about resources. Like there's multiple things, and even like even things in between those, like using someone as a sounding board for something if it's not quite a collaboration, just trying to find an expert on something, or just exploring. Like this is sort of exploratory. Again, this is the ADHD, but it goes back and forth for me. You might sort of like, believe it or not, it sounds funny to say this, but like there's a lot of spontaneity that can come out of using technology, because you might sort of end up in a place, especially in the sort of internet social media side of things, you might end up in a place where you didn't expect to at all. A rabbit hole can be a good thing sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're a rabbit, if you're hunting for things, a rabbit hole can be good. It can be a bad thing too. But I think like it's interesting because the pandemic made me think of this. Like we were so much in our bubbles, and we still are. And some of that's a function of LA, especially we are, because no one wants to park or drive anywhere. But but technology can get us out of our bubbles, and sometimes it can trap people in other kinds of bubbles. But I mean, as I think Yael or Deborah said at the top of the podcast, it's a tool.
I wanted to ask.
Discovery and surprise, I think, are some things that are helpful with it beyond the things I've already mentioned.
I wanted to ask you about something now that you brought that up, because when the internet started, we were all excited about the global village, that we'd all see each other, and that there'd be some kind of tikkun olam, there'd be some kind of healing. And I feel like something went wrong, because I do think when you bring a new perspective in to show, by the way, I live here, let me tell you what's really going on. You're over there, I'm over here, I kind of know what's going on. There's some gap in like the system where that exposure still does not village, because people get entrenched in their ideas of what things are true and what things are not true based on other things that they're consuming. So when the real person comes from that real land and says, this is how my life is, there's a part of me that's wondering why tech has given us all these incredible flows towards all kinds of people, talk about empathy, but why it hasn't done the big healing. I know it's a huge question, and that's not your focus, Deb, in terms of the show, but I do think inside our creative process and using tech is the hope that it's impactful and meaningful. And I think the people who started the internet might have said, wow, we're going to all hold hands now, and it's going to be great. And then it's not so great.
Well, I do agree. It's a big question. And I do remember the late 80s, early 90s is when I remember I was doing competitive public speaking, and the internet was a topic people talked about because it was new and interesting and it hadn't been explored yet. There are ways to use tech for good, for better good. So if you have a magic wand, what would you do?
Great question.
Well,
I'm going to pass it off. I'll pass it off, and I'll let the others talk. But that's a great question. The magic wand would be obviously something good. Yeah, I'll hold off.
Yael,
Huh?
what are you? I mean, and you are using a magic wand. You created Maestro games, but what more can like regular people do to use the gifts of creativity and tech to make the world a better place?
I think that we have to focus on becoming more empathetic people. And that really is and unfortunately, like Deborah said, the internet, not so much, it didn't fulfill the kumbaya mission, if you will. And if I, going down the rabbit hole on that, it wasn't, to me, it was about greed, and it was about like exploitation and people being able to turn around and say, oh, well, I can use the internet for, advancement economically of this particular class, because a lot of people that are, quote, in the not haves don't have access, right? So it became a classist tool as opposed to an empowering tool. And to me, that's really where it went south, if you will, and made it more destructive than healing. And, I could go down that rabbit hole of like, look, Zuckerberg started Facebook to rate women's appearances. And I'm very much about the power of intent, and and people, I get yelled at a lot for that, but to me, there's the power of the intent, and then the old adage, I think it's either Yiddish or Hebrew, that the fish stinks from the head. And so when you look at like, okay, what was the original intent of this? And the original intent of this was to rate women on their appearance and of Facebook. And the original, it wasn't to bring humanity together. So when you look at that and you think, oh, okay, well, this is how it started. And same, and the internet was a great idea. but it got corrupted really quickly. And so I think the hardest part now is trying to figure out a way to pull back from focusing on human nature's baser instincts and trying to elevate people to pull away from what they can exploit and instead empower and extend their hands as opposed to not. And that's a tall order. It's a really, really hard thing to do. I'm going to come back to, look, my philosophy about creativity is that it can either be used for good or not good or evil, right? And because creativity can be used either for good or evil, that's always in our hands, and it's always our decision. It worries me tremendously that AI is doing a lot of the creativity for us. Although I maintain that AI will never write Beethoven's Ninth, but that's a concern, because if you take away the creativity and you outsource the creativity for good, what's uplifting and what's joyful and what's beautiful and what gives you chills and make you cry and all of that, then you're going to be leaving creativity in the hands of folks that want to use it for ill. And to me, that's a really, really, really deep concern, and it has to be talked about, and it's not really talked about that much right now. Mm-hmm.
So the idea of, I love the word you used, intent, because that really is the root of everything. Right. Are you going to put good in the world? I do what I do because I believe everybody deserves a fulfilling, joyful life. It doesn't have to be all the time, but if you have the intent to do good, to make the world a better place, to uplift others, you're starting on the right track, that whole service philosophy. So I do believe it starts with intent. So let's just fix the world and say, let's think about the good. What good can come from things, and what can we create? Because the more good we put in the world, it can drown out some of the evil.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of agree with what you were saying. And when you ask, like, what would you use a magic wand for to make technology better for people? I think, honestly, nothing. There's not really an answer to it. It's like, say, what would you do to make fire? This is the flip side of the tool, the double-edged sword question. Like, what would you do to make,
fire better,
electricity better for everybody? It just is. And I think the technology we have to work on is ourselves.
Yes.
The more positive, optimistic version of your question, maybe more towards the title of this episode, is I think that technology has lowered the barriers to entry for people to be creative who don't have any formal training or connections or resources. And I think there's a large number of people who are aware of that, and that's growing. But certainly letting more people, maybe people who are marginalized or who are lacking means of creative expression or want to use that for whatever reasons, who are not necessarily don't see role models in their community who are doing that, or just it's never occurred to them, making that known to more and more people is a beneficial use of technology for creativity, just extending the gift of creativity to more people, I think.
Love that. And Deb does too, because she is nodding. So what did you want to add?
Everything that was said is lovely. And I just it resonates with me because in my little lane, we're trying to democratize podcasting to the point where everybody can lift their voice and amplify it and connect with people through conversation and use their intention would be to speak their truth and also offer an iterative aspect of that, because it is interactive. People do reply to what you say. And I think that's where, if conversation stops, progress stops. As long as people are still talking, we have hope. And that's sort of the baseline for me. Can I get people to talk across divides? But even more interestingly, there's a question I ask a lot when people come onto Swell, tell me what you ate when you were 10 years old, who was around, what were the sounds, what'd you smell? And when someone answers that question, you learn about everything in their life, where they came from, who they loved, who loved them, what their sadness is, what their joy is. It's that in that one question, and it builds a bridge to anybody, no matter what their socioeconomic background is or their skill sets. It's just they ate something when they were 10 or they wouldn't be here now. So they could talk about it pretty easily.
And mine was soup.
Yes.
Bringing the conversation back to soup.
Full circle. And I talked to you about soup also on the last podcast. So yeah.
Yes. Probably one of my more serious conversations, which is fine. I am all about the uplifting serious topics so we can underline a highlight and do better, spread more good, joy, whatever in the world. I love to lead people with goals. So what is a good goal that you wish to gift to the audience, something that they can do to start playing with creativity in the realm of tech? Deb, do you have a goal to gift?
100%. And it's pushing what I do, but it's to the benefit of anyone who's listening, which is to go to swellcast.com, and start a personal podcast. Do it. It could be about anything. Just do it. It could be about your big toe. It could be about your big brother. Just do it. Start free. Go do it.
Okay. Do you?
I mean, you know what? I want to demystify it by saying that that's all you need to do. I feel like the goal, the underlying goal of starting a podcast through Swell is to proclaim yourself a little louder than you might have yesterday. It's taking that next step and saying, I've been a mom and I haven't been working and now I have something to say. I've been a kid in a divorced family. I have something to say. I'm an elder person with lots of wisdom. I have something to say. I'm a pilot who thinks that the industry is screwed up. I have something to say. Say it. The goal is to don't sit on the sidelines, get inside the ring and use your voice and make an impact. Or if you're just a crazy slam poet, start a Swellcast and slam that poetry. Go out there and do it.
So it's not just about raising your voice. It's kind of like claiming your voice and then raising it.
I have to say that the word raising there's a double-edged sword to that. There's so much noise out there. There's so much contention. There's so much chatter. We're living in a painful time right now. And I think what we need to do is take a step back, close the door, go inside ourselves. What do we really want to see in the world and be the change? Sorry to pull from such a brilliant quote, but I have to. And so it's not about amplifying for the sake of amplifying. That's what social media said. Broadcast yourself. Why? Go back for the why. Find the why, then start a personal podcast.
Okay. And what is your why?
My why is absolutely the most baseline thing. I love listening, and I start to get to listen if I posit an idea. So my why is I get to posit an idea and then I get to listen back and I learn, and it's delightful and I connect to people. It's truly, I performed for 30 years like this and I was the person, it was one way. And I didn't like it, actually. I didn't like my work because I felt lonely and disconnected and like, who am I to tell you to shut up and listen to me for 45 minutes? I never got it, actually. And I wish I knew it back then. I would have had interactive shows more. And I finally ended up doing that. But I think the why for me is connection. Absolutely. Because in there is the empathy and the learning and the circle of kumbaya that I think you want before you leave this earth, sort of.
I love that. So I'm going to ask the same question to Rob and Yael before I get their goals. So Yael, what is your why?
What is my why? Tikkun Olam.
Yeah.
To repair the world. Full stop.
And Rob?
Bring joy. Just make more people happy wherever I can.
Can mine be like all three of those? Because I feel like that. Well,
you can say whatever you want, Deb. It's your.
It's my show. But everything you said really speaks to a combination of me, because I believe there is power in joy, in uplifting, the happy, just uplifting, the happy, the good in the world, and do what you do to make the world a better place. And how do you do it? By connecting with others and building things together. So I kind of love how all of your whys kind of make the best soup that is mine. And speaking of soup, Yael, what goal would you like to gift to our audience?
So I'm gonna borrow from one of our Bibles for our company, and it's a book called Your Brain on Art, and it's by Susan Maximum and Ivy Ross. And what they proved actually with their research is that daily interaction with the arts is essential for a person's longevity, full stop. So and then there's another book called Scientific Power of Awe by Dashiell Keltner out of Berkeley, where he proved that 5 minutes of awe a day literally changes your physiology. And Deborah's going to get the copy of the book. Yes. So those are our two Bibles, along with Renee Fleming's anthology, Music and Mind. So I guess for the gift that I have is to just implore people to gift themselves daily awe. And it doesn't have to be the most amazing sunset in the world. It could be, the first sip of the cup of coffee in the morning. It could be anything. But gift themselves the awe, and also do a couple minutes, even if you're just doodling while you're on the phone, or sing or hum or do something in the arts every day, because it changes, it builds over time and it changes your physiology. So do that.
Oh, that's great. Good stuff here.
You're gonna have
Rob?
to mute me right now, I think.
I think the goal, is gift yourself, I don't know, let's say an hour just to play with creativity and maybe using technological tools. There's so many great tools: Procreate for art, GarageBand for music, iMovie, like free, cheap, really, really robust stuff at the very basic level. Just play around for an hour with no goal and no outcome, just to do it. I promise it'll be very rewarding for you. Whatever comes out of it will be good for you. Or at the very least, it will relieve some stress and it'll make everyone else's life around you a little better.
Yes, because when you are, and I do talk about this a lot, the personal goals and the professional goals, they work hand in hand, because if your life is better, it's going to make everything else better, whether it is the personal leaking into the professional or vice versa. And yes, you can do the playtime with tech or away from tech. But whatever it is that you're doing, I love the idea of without an outcome, because you will inadvertently discover something amazing without that pressure on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, no one wants me to be doodling. I will stick with my cooking for creativity, because that vibes well with me. You don't want to see my doodles.
But I would say just to a little bit is maybe like dare to try a creative thing you haven't tried, that you're not like, I like, a thing that you usually do anyway is great. But what if you sort of like, were a little bolder and scared yourself a little and tried something and like, oh, I'm not an artist. And what if you tried like an art program after considering, growth mindset we all talk about, right? Like, what about it going a little bit beyond what you think you are in a way that no one will see? Dance like nobody's watching. Be creative like nobody's watching, and maybe that actually may open up some new, I think some new layers in you, just to try it, even if you suck at it, just to do it.
Fine. I like that as a bonus goal. Great if you want to start with the comfort zone, but to get out of your comfort zone and try and be creative in new ways. Years ago, when I was leading the live group, we had someone who was always writing these really gory sci-fi or horror or whatever stuff. And I remember telling him, what if you wrote a personal story, just for fun? It was the best thing he ever wrote. So when you open yourself up to what's possible, you have absolutely no idea what can come of it. So, okay, challenge accepted. Wonderful, deep conversation, friends. Where can people learn more about you? Rob?
This is not very creative, I'm sorry, at robkutner.com.
Easy peasy. What about you, Deb?
Swellcast.com.
Okay. And what about your website? No?
Oh, my website's great too. I mean, for me, it's DeborahPardes.com. Just like Rob, I went to the same University of Creativity of .coms.
And Yael?
She's muted, I think.
Oh.
Oh, okay. MaestroGames.com for, yeah.
And if you go to thedebmethod.com/blog, you will get the recap and all the links to these wonderful people. I am at the Deb Method everywhere. You can subscribe to GoalChat on iTunes and or your favorite places to listen to podcasts. And like I said, I'm at the Deb Method everywhere for YouTube and Facebook and what have you. And I am live every Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific to dive into these wonderful conversations. So if you can catch us live, comment. If not, catch the replays and allow it to inspire you to try new things, elevate yourself so you can have more impact in the best possible way. What final thought would you like to leave everybody with? Yael, final thought?
Everybody has the power within them to uplift the world.
The power within them too. I missed a word.
Uplift the world.
I completely agree. So what is stopping you? Uplift. Love it. Rob, final thought?
Everyone is creative, and if you think you aren't, maybe you just haven't found the way to be creative or realized how you're being creative already in your life.
Also true. And Deb, final thought.
Be true to yourself, because that's all that matters, to be true to yourself.
I agree with that one as well. And again, if you combine these things, be true to yourself, be creative, and use your power to uplift, because there's enough going on that's the opposite. So when you are making your mark on the world, do what you can to, I know we're not all Debs. I always look at it from the sunny side of things, but we all have these gifts, these creative powers. So if you don't know what it is, take that time to explore, find the things that you love, because I guarantee it, if you love what you're doing, it's going to show and it's going to shine from within. Thank you all again, Rob Kutner, Deborah Pardes, Yael Swerdlow, for joining me. Thank you for tuning in to GoalChat. So you've got these great, creative, technological goals. So go on out there and go for it, because we know you can do it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.